Afternoon. As mentioned, I'm Gilbert Blocker. I work for a company XCentium, XCentium. If you want to reach me, it's gilbert.blocker@XCentium.com. Feel free to email me any questions you have, any solutions that you guys come up with. Just as he mentioned, we want to be a part of the same community, offer our expertise, and receive the same. So. Show of hands, have any of you seen Sitecore Commerce or touched or heard of it, or you've seen it? Have you worked with it? Okay, cool. Also, show of hands, how many of you are developers versus marketers? Developers, okay, cool. Cool, this would be more developer centric. It's really just a good overview. Scroll. We're gonna do a good overview of the product itself. What it is, how it's built up, how it can help you. Then we'll go over some of the new features and improvements specific to 9.3, which was recently released in January, the end of January. Then we'll talk about the installation process and some of the requirements. Then if we can, we'll get into setting up your development environment and working with plugins, okay? Feel free to stop me if you have any questions or if I'm going too fast or if none of it makes sense or anything. Okay, first, directly from the Sitecore Experience Commerce page. Sitecore Experience Commerce is an e-commerce solution built on the Sitecore XP platform, which empowers marketers and merchandisers to fully personalize the end-to-end shopping experience before, during, and after the transaction. I love that word empowers because it truly does that. It gives you the ability to manage and promote your products, your customers, your orders, handle all of that stuff with fluid tools and seamless integration. It provides all the tools you need for managing your storefront with multiple layers of extensibility, including the Commerce Engine, the Commerce Business Tools, and the XSA Storefront. Now, the XSA Storefront is essentially an out-of-the-box storefront that you can customize and theme up to meet your client's needs or whatever, so that you don't have to build it directly from the ground up. It's a lot of great reference projects, a lot of great tools and components and renderings that you can just take and put on your page. We won't go too much over the storefront today, but we will dive deep into the Commerce Engine and those business tools. Okay. Commerce Engine. Here's a good screen grab of what the Commerce Engine is, a nice broad overview. Of course, it's a thin ASP.NET Core application, okay, which houses the entire set of microservices that make up the Commerce Core functionality, okay. It provides a pluggable framework for extending the engine. That pluggable framework is essentially how the entire system is built, where you, if you're familiar with it, you know that you can plug in, you can configure your Sitecore to use specific plugin blocks or specific solutions that they have, whether it be rewards, promotions, carts, their catalog, and so on. If you don't need additional taxing, you can take it out. If you do, you can add it and extend it, okay? The Commerce Service plugin, which provides the layer that developers interact with, is actually what we'll get more into today if we can set up our development environment or talk about our development environment. And from there, we'll talk about putting custom plugins and custom pipelines into it. And we'll do that using the Commerce Service plugin. Okay. Any questions about that? All right. The Commerce Engine roles. This is a big thing. With Commerce Engine, for developers, it's usually a single instance where we run it through our Visual Studio so that we can debug or track everything that's happening, of course. But on a production environment, you have multiple instances. Those instances are called roles, okay? So you have an authoring role, which serves traffic from the business tools back to your, whether it be Postman or to your Sitecore environment, okay? Then from there you have the shops role. The shops role is the instance that stores all of the cache and visitors hit. Visitors go to the shops, shops talks back to authoring, and so the minions role, it runs independently, but supports asynchronous calls, right? So you can set up a minion to execute jobs based on a time frame, based on rules that are being met, but that's a separate instance itself. No one doesn't receive much traffic, it just runs the jobs for you. And then you have a DevOps role. And those are specifically for us developers that we can tap into and make sure that everything's running without our push code to without touching the authoring or the shops instances, okay? Again, those instances, as you see in the screenshot, are actual site APIs that sit inside your IIS that host the same amount of code. There's the difference in them is specifically, it's theoretical or whatever. It's not logical differences. They're all the same code base. Every time you deploy or make a change in your Visual Studio to the solution, you deploy the code base to all 4 of the environments. Make sense?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So let's say this was in Azure. Would each one of these be a separate app service then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they are. And that's a good question. The majority of the solutions that I work on are in Azure, and they all have their own ORM template, each one of these instances as well, because each one, based on the policies and configuration, can have their own settings. So you can have auto deploying for, depending on the environment itself, whether it's a QA or a SIT environment, then a UAT environment, you can set specific settings for the site, specific settings for each environment, and each request is going to pass through that environment that you want to run. Okay, whether that be for the SIT and authoring, and then shops can have a different set of settings for authoring as well, for SIT. Commerce Business Tools. This is where all of the magic happens, all of the management of your customers, management of your inventory, your merchandising, all of that. It's a set of rich business tools built for merchandisers and customer service representatives that is built on Angular. So it's fluid, it's very extensible. You don't really go in and change the business tools, but you can extend them by adding on to them. So for instance, if you needed to add additional addresses to a customer's profile, you can go and do that through here, but you'll just have to plug into that views or entity views service plugin that we were talking about earlier, okay? Again, extensible through pluggable framework and allows updating of the out-of-the-box tools to meet specific needs. Again, that Commerce View service provided by the Views plugin allows creation of the entity views, okay? That provides a data-driven mechanism that allows you to tap into the APIs that are frontward-facing or outward-facing from the Commerce Service Engine. Does that make sense? So if you needed to update an inventory set based on a purchase that isn't out of the box here, you can create logic to do so inside of the entity views.
Now, what solution would you do that in? Would you do that in, that would be a separate application?
That would be a separate, well, it'd be a separate project inside of your Sitecore Commerce Engine solution. And we'll talk about that a bit, how to set up a project or add a project to the existing solution, okay? Some of the management features. I'm going to go over a couple of these. I have some notes here, but if you have questions on any of them in particular, I can specifically talk about those. But the catalog and sellable items. So first, a sellable item inside of commerce is anything that is tangible or non-tangible. So a pair of glasses or clothing or a bike or anything that's tangible. And then you have warranties, you have subscription products. Those are non-tangible items. They're all considered sellable items inside of Sitecore Commerce. And you manage those through the merchandising tool. Okay, your inventory and your customers, all of those have their own management tools as well, and you'll see them up there. Some of the big things that these tools provide are, let me just scroll down, I'm sorry. Some of the big things that they provide, of course, is the extensibility, but searching, management, storing, caching, exporting, importing customers or importing products from a third-party system. There are some tools and plugins that are out of the box that allow you to do that, but of course you can create your own. A couple of the ones that we're going to discuss today are promotions and inventory in terms of what 9.3 did to improve Okay, so that was an overview of the product itself, the tool, a couple of the tools, the interfaces that they use. But 9.3 focused on increasing the solution performance, the ability to scale, along with the functional enhancements and corrective content. There's always corrective content, right? With Sitecore, each release has release notes that tell you, hey, we fixed this because a bunch of us start complaining like this doesn't work well. So Sitecore does well with listening, as well as taking in plugins, reading the community, understanding what some of the architects are doing, and then adopting those practices and putting them into the solution. So some of the enhancements that you'll see are based on its recent release of 9.0 as having to go in and fix some things and then capturing that and saying, hey, all right, we're gonna put this in our next release. So some of the areas improved are the scalability, the business tools usability, promotions, price cards, inventory, connect, and storefront. And just to have some of my few favorites for each one of them, I put a bunch of bullets up here. So I won't go over each bullet, but if you want to, yeah, just a ton of them. Okay, but the new commerce-based index, the reason that is important, because prior to 9.3, we were using the Sitecore Master and Sitecore Web index in order to grab the products. Now that can be high intensive, and increase or decrease your performance or decrease the requests. In order to improve that, we created a new commerce-based index itself, which is separate from the web and separate from the master, and it only holds the commerce products that get stored inside of Sitecore Content Tree. So if you're familiar, you'll know that you create your products over in the business tools, and you save them, and then you refresh your commerce cache inside of Sitecore, and you can see them in your content tree. That allows it to be added to that web index. But there were a heavy load of traffic, and if you have a lot of products, a lot of requests, it can take time for product listing pages to come up. Some of the actions or jobs that need to run have to use that same web index to get those products. So they decided to go ahead and separate that index to make it a much shorter response time.
That's still solar?
That is still solar. Yeah, but we introduced Redis. I keep saying we. Redis was introduced, and that's the next bullet point, for the caching. Okay, but yes, solar still, and they also allow you to use Azure Search if you're hosting directly on Azure. But yes, solar is still the recommended search tool. But replace the cache in CE Connect with the centralized Redis cache to improve response time. Everyone in here familiar with Redis? Redis is what they consider a key value store type of database. So because Sitecore Commerce, the way it's built up in its foundation, all of the data is stored as JSON objects, essentially. Okay, so you can make a call, and all of your data that's going to come back is a large JSON object. Okay, and because of that, we can store a key value pair inside of Redis for easy caching. Okay, they reduce the depth of the pipeline calls. We'll get further into that, but when you create a plugin, it's just a bunch of pipelines, a command, a pipeline, and a few blocks inside of that pipeline. Well, in previous integrations, we were creating a command for each call, regardless of how many pipelines were in there. So we determined that if it's only one call or one pipeline that's being called, let's go ahead and take that block out of the pipeline and append it to a separate pipeline to reduce the calls. So that really increased the response time for the page view rate. Some of the business tools that were enhanced were added the search. It's for promotions and price cards, added paging, improved the display of sections on the sellable items page. Some small things, but made it much easier for the CSRs to manage their items inside of those business tools. Okay, a couple of my favorites, promotions and that connect, but for promotions and inventory, we added the ability to create a promotion that applies to all products in a category. So in previous installations, you had to go and add all of the products to one promotion if you wanted those products to meet that promotion's requirement. But now you can say, hey, I want this promotion to be applied to this category, and all the products beneath that category will have that promotion applied to it. So it significantly decreased time on creating those promotions and applying on the products. So something that marketers love. We added the ability to extend the end date of an active promotion. Also, if you're familiar, once you save a promotion, it's saved, it's done. But now we can go into those active ones and say, all right, we're going to give them an additional week on this promotion. Let's just update the end date instead of creating a brand new promotion and then going and applying that promotion to all the products. So that, again, was a big one based on complaints that Sitecore took in. New features to the inventory manager allows inventory set removal. Inventory sets are, of course, just kind of like categories, except those inventory sets can be exported and applied to different storefronts versus the categories. Connect in the storefront, this is Connect, Commerce Engine Connect, which goes directly inside of Sitecore. So there's two ways to call the Commerce Engine API. You can use a Commerce Engine Connect, or you can build a service proxy. I personally use a service proxy itself. That way it's lighter, faster calls, and it comes directly from Sitecore instead of contacting the API itself. So, but they did make some significant adjustments to how Commerce Connect works with the storefront. You can see them there. I won't go too much into them because I'm not getting in a storefront. All right. That's an overview of the new features and enhancements that were provided in the Sitecore 9.3. Here are your minimum installation requirements for 9.3. Some of them have been updated, including the .NET Core server hosting package version, the OData version, and then, of course, introducing the Redis data store and using Windows Server 2019 now. The minimum is SQL Server 2016 in terms of the database, but it has to be Service Pack 2. Okay, just a quick screenshot of those guys. We have more installation requirements. And this is important because once you begin to install Commerce Engine, if you don't meet every requirement, you can ruin your setup. Okay, just like Sitecore, essentially, right? So focus, be patient, and I'll say this on a couple of slides ahead as we try to talk about installing, and make sure that you're meeting you've installed your .NET Core 2.17 hosting bundle. Make sure that you install through NuGet the Microsoft Visual Studio Web targets, just as you would on Sitecore. Copy that DLL to a place. Make sure you note all of that good stuff too. Okay. As mentioned, Solar 8.1.1 is their recommended search, but they do support Azure Search as well, which is actually on that first billet. All right, so before you begin, you want to make sure you set up your search provider. As we discussed, set up Solar, make sure that is running, make sure that you can rebuild all of your link indexes, make sure you can rebuild all of your link databases and your search indexes, and that they work, and you can go to the Solar URL and do a search for your product before you do the installation. Then you want to grab that Solar URL, grab the Solar root, the Solar service, all of the, just take note of all of those settings, because you're going to need them to update a massive configuration file, and you do not want to miss a step, okay? Ensure that you've added your recognized user to the XDB shared databases. This is important if you want to use the X profile or any additional profile analytics that Sitecore uses inside of the Commerce Engine. You want to make sure that if you are running the installation, you have the proper administrative rights and permissions during your installation. So Commerce Engine uses Windows authentication. I know Sitecore's installation, you can use a server admin to install, but Commerce Engine prefers it be Windows authenticated. So make sure that you can log into your SQL database through Windows authentication. I point that out because that has been an issue amongst many developers. Then make note of your SQL Server and all of the settings for your installation.
They redid the installation.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I used SIA,
Yeah.
Sitecore Installation
Assistant, yeah.
And it took 10 minutes to set up.
It's
Sitecore.
quick. It installs
And I didn't
prerequisites
have to
for
do
you and
anything
everything, right?
solar or
Yeah,
anything like that.
because it will install those prerequisites for you. It shows you exactly. Yeah, SIA is amazing.
work
If you guys
for
have it,
Commerce?
it does not.
Okay.
No, there is no SIA for commerce yet.
Okay.
I wish it was.
Okay. Because it sounds like what you're going through, it's necessary, but it's tedious.
Yeah, it is definitely
You pay
tedious,
attention to it.
and I think they realized it was tedious with the Sitecore install, right?
realize that
And they
years ago,
introduced a SIA. And if everyone familiar with SIA, with the install assistant? It's an interface that allows you to just enter your settings, enter your site name, host name, determine if you have all your prerequisites, if you have the proper .NET modules installed, all of the good stuff. It's actually, like he mentioned, 10 minutes long. It's one of the best tools that they've introduced, to be honest with you. If that can be installed here, then we would no longer need the next screen. After, you'll see. I've used it for 9.3. I think it was introduced in 9.2 though. Yeah.
So they've had SIA, but
Yeah.
the new version for 9.3 is completely different.
Yeah.
Because previously you still had to do solar separately,
Oh yeah, that is true.
and in 9.3 you don't touch anything.
Yeah. It creates
You make
certificates
your
for
.NET
you.
frameworks there, I think, but I mean basic things, but I think everything else is done for you.
Yeah. It creates all your security certificates for you. Yeah, it's definitely a time saver itself. It doesn't even require PowerShell. Well, it requires you to have it, but you don't have to go and use PowerShell at all for it.
They redid this
Yeah.
PowerShell scripts.
They did. Yeah. Yep. So again, those prerequisite installations are amazing because as you know, you can think that you're installing the proper version of .NET Core, but but you're wrong.
Quick question, it says,
Mm-hmm.
is Redis required for Commerce 9.3? Is that a new requirement?
Well, you have the ability to disable it. Out of the box, it's enabled, but I have not used it without it.
Okay, I haven't used it with it, so that's
Oh yeah.
interesting.
Well, yeah, Redis is recently introduced into 9.3.
Okay, there you go.
Yes, it was not a part of.
So, but you could
9.
set it up if you
You
wanted.
could set it up on previous versions,
Okay.
but now it's out of the box. Like if you go to the installation guide, it says one of the first things you want to do is download and install Redis. It's best for the installation itself, as it's searching for Redis paths, and if you do not do so, I believe you have to do some additional things for your data store, for your caching. It goes back to, it defaults back to the Sitecore caching. Okay. So download release package in the prereqs. You'll want to set up a deployment folder, very similar to old version of Sitecore, or how you wanted to install it using PowerShell. Set up your deployment folder. You're going to extract those installation files. The main files that you want to go out and download and put inside of the assets folder inside of that deploy folder are the PowerShell extension 6.0, Sitecore Experience Accelerator 9.3, and as mentioned before, the Visual Studio Web Targets. You're going to copy that XML transform DLL, put it in that assets folder because you're going to reference it. All right, download and install Redis. It's pretty simple if you can find the actual download file. As you know, Redis is a Linux tool, and for production environments, it's suggested that you run it on the Linux server. But for your development environment, there is a tar that you can download and then just go to the deployment, bring up your Windows PowerShell, get to that directory, and you can start Redis by just executing that line or double-clicking on the executable file in the directory. And then you can actually use the client by saying redis-server-cli.exe, and that'll bring up your client in PowerShell, and you can ping it and verify all your data storage. Yeah, you can make your calls. Create a secret client certificate. This is something that SIA would do for you. But here, you just go in, you can just do a new self-signed certificate and then find that certificate and copy that value because you're going to need that certificate value in your deployment script. if you guys run into any issues with that, feel free to email. There is some information out there on Google, but it can lead you down the wrong path. Make sense? All of these are, I would say maybe a third of the entire configuration, but these are the ones that you'll definitely change and they're most important. I'm not going to go over all of them, of course, but the XC install root is the parent folder. Oh, first let me say this. Your configuration file will be inside of your Sitecore install framework folder, your SIF, SIF dot, whatever version number you have. You'll want to extract that out, get in there, and then you'll find your deployment script, okay? These are the files that the properties that you'll modify inside that deployment script, okay? Some of them are very important because if you, I'll say it again, if you mess these up, your installation is crap, and you'll just have to go back and undo and try and redo, okay? So the merge tool full path, that's that XML transform that we were talking about. You want to put the path to wherever you stored it after you've installed it through NuGet. And the best way to do that, I found, is open up a Visual Studio project, anyone, it can be a blank project, and then go through your package manager console and install it.
So question.
Mm-hmm.
I've installed Commerce for like 9.9.2. Have they made it, well, no, 9.0.2. Have they made it easier to install this thing? Because it was a beast.
Easier? No,
Okay.
not easier.
Okay, just wanted to know.
More complete inside of the PowerShell install, yes. Previous versions, there were some additional things that you have to do, including updating your thumbprints, grabbing your thumbprint, updating in the proper configuration files for each instance. PowerShell now, the new script handles that stuff for you. So I wouldn't say easier, but more seamless. Okay. Make sure that your site name, there'll be site name, some may think is the Commerce site name, but no, that's actually the site name of the XP installation that you'll be installing Commerce on top of. Okay. Of course, your install directory is the path to the XP site itself. If it's hosted on IIS and your www root, it's that folder that it sits in. It's the path. Okay. Your Redis configuration, after you install Redis, you'll want to make sure that out of the box is localhost. If you have Redis installed on a separate server somewhere, you'll want to update the URL there. If not, you can leave it as localhost, give it a proper instance name, and the installation path is wherever you've downloaded Redis and ran that previous executable. All of these commerce services ports, you see the default value for ops services port is 5015, shops is 5005, authoring is 500. Those are all out of the box. If you have multiple instances of Commerce running or multiple projects and you're not using a VM, then you want to make sure you update those because those are specific to your project. So if you have something running on 5,000 already, you're going to want to update that to 6,000 or whatever. Okay.
Sorry, not to complain. I don't
Go
know,
ahead.
why did they do that? Why did,
Yeah.
That's some feedback I would give them.
Yeah, ask them why.
They should make those hosts and not ports because,
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry.
There are a number of different ports. Localhost 4200 is the main one for the business tools. So if you have something running on 4200, you're going to want to change that as well. Okay.
Sorry, I just wanted to complain.
Yeah, you could complain.
Seems like it'd be easier to spin up another VM
Yeah, I just do a VM, and
instead of.
for the most part, use a VM. If I can suggest, use a VM, and then you can leave some of those ports to default. But there are definitely instances, like I have 2 or 3 instances running on one box that aren't in the VM. Okay. Now let's say we're executing the script. You guys know what PowerShell looks like. Of course, ensure you met all the roles requirements before execution. You want to back up your XP files and DBs. That way you don't totally blow your XP installation out of the water. Review. It's highly important that you review that configuration files. Even inside of the configuration, there's a master single server JSON. You see that? That's where all of the tasks and the includes of everything that needs to be run, whether it be the modules or separate configuration, happen. Okay, and if error does occur, you want to take note of what task or module errored out. So for instance, if it errored during the installation of a Sitecore module like Experience Accelerator or something like that, you're going to want to go into the master single server JSON, which is inside of your configuration folder, and you're going to want to comment or remove the tasks that have completed and then run it again so that it can skip those tasks, and because if not, it'll try and run them again and it could very well break your solution.
Were you getting sweats whenever?
No, I just know what he's talking about. Review, because you gotta.
To review. Oh, and be patient because it does take a while. It takes a long while, especially if you're installing like XXA Storefront and you're installing the out-of-the-box catalog, Habitat, or AdventureWorks. Those can be heavy to install all of the images, all of the products, and it's good for you to do that so that you're not starting from the ground up again. It's always good to have a good reference point and also to make sure that your installation works because your XSA site would come up. Okay. Once you complete the deployment, you can go and verify those business tools. And I know it just seems like a standard thing, opening a window, but no, you would verify them by going to hitting the IIS sites, hitting those services, the ports that we discussed earlier. Then going into Sitecore, your XP installation, looking at your Launchpad, and you should have a new Commerce Business Tools section. And you click on that, it opens in a new window, and this is what it looks like essentially. Okay, you'll verify that your catalog exists in the content tree. This is important as well. That ensures that your Solar and your Redis cache store is working. If you do not see your catalog in the content tree, then it can't be reached. All of this is fixable, though. You just have to figure out by looking at the logs and seeing why isn't it. Okay, you visit those service URLs, of course, and then if you are planning to use the XSA, update those themes to meet your. Anybody in here familiar with updating XXA templates and styles using the Creative Exchange? Okay, that's a pretty good. Brett, you're familiar with the Creative? Yeah. Those are maybe we can do that in another meetup. It's a pretty good way, or their suggested way of working with SXA and getting you all up and running. Okay. How are we looking on time?
Two minutes.
Okay, all right, I got 2 slides. Well, yeah, I think this is a couple of slides, just smaller. So, real quick, once you've installed, once everything is up and running, then it's time to actually develop with it. You'll want to set up your development environment. Inside of the install folder, you have an SDK folder. It's called sitecore.commerceengine.sdk. Inside of there, you have sample solutions, okay? You'll want to install the Visual Studio extension for the plugins, though, okay? You just double-click that and install it for you, and that's how you'll be making those additional products and those custom plugins based on that extension. You'll find that Commerce sample solution, copy it into your working directory, change the name of everything, clean up the solution because it does come out of the box with some sample plugins for you to copy or to integrate. Things like Braintree. If you need a payment provider, they have one. They provide Braintree for you. I wish they provide PayPal out of the box, but Braintree is sufficient enough. And then you want to run your Commerce Engine from Visual Studio. Earlier, I talked about the development environment has that one instance. Well, that's the Visual Studio instance. Doesn't require authoring, doesn't require the minions, doesn't require all of those guys. You just put it inside of Visual Studio, update your policies and configuration to use whatever minions that you want, whatever additional custom minions that you create, you'll put it inside of Visual Studio. But you'll want to make sure that you set your Commerce Engine, that project from the sample solution as your startup project, and ensure that you have your secured licenses inside of the directory in order for it to communicate. Okay. The JSON files, config.json and global.json, are the most important files inside of an instance, including the IIS instances. You'll see them. I think I have a screenshot, but they're inside of the www root You want to make sure that your config JSON matches what you have deployed onto your environment versus what is coming out of the box. So updating your thumbprint, updating your SQL Server environment information, all of that good stuff. And then you're going to go and stop your commerce authoring website, which is the main website for the business tools. Okay. And you're stopping that because it's running on port 5000 and your Visual Studio will now be running on port 5000 unless you decide to change it. Okay. Real quick. Go fast. Going faster. Real quick, work with plugins. Plugins are composed of these items here. These are the biggest ones. They're entities, components, models, controllers, and commands, or whatnot. An entity is an actual a view, okay, something that goes on the commerce tool itself. A component is, think of it as just a JSON object with additional data that gets stored on top of another JSON object. You guys know what models and controllers are. The command, everything requires a command in order for Commerce Engine to connect to talk to it, or for you to hit it directly from Postman or from another external site to that API. Does that make sense? You guys are familiar with pipelines, and inside of the Commerce Engine, though, that infrastructure, a pipeline is just composed of multiple blocks that you can pull from, add to. You can add your block before or to an existing pipeline. Make sense? And this would be how you create a plugin. I'm not going to go too much into this, but feel free. This would be on wherever Brett, uploads it. You can go through, and it's just a good set of quick notes on getting started with creating your own custom plugin. A plugin itself is additional functionality that you need. So let's say that once a user makes a purchase, you need to report that to, or you need additional taxing from somewhere like Avalara, or you need to report that purchase back to an external system like Salesforce or something like that. You can create a custom plugin to do so, and then push that in.
Is this a plugin for the business tools, for the Commerce Engine?
No, a plugin for the actual logic of through the purchase flow, or a plugin for any actual activity. So, but that's a good question because it is the same concept, except you would create an entity view type plugin based on that Commerce View services we talked about earlier in order for those business tools. That makes sense? Thank you.